Here is a quick introduction to our project here, If the World Were a Village of 100 People. And the basic idea is, instead of talking about the 7+ billion people in the world on any given day, what if we boiled it down to just 100 people? What if we kind of boiled everything down and kind of made it into a nice even 100? How many males, how many females, how many would we have from each country? All different kinds of things. Let's take a look at, if we were to break this down into kind of a more manageable number, what would our world look like? And we kind of assume that, well, there'd be lots of Americans and lots of people that look like us, but in reality, there's not a lot of us out there in comparison to the population of the entire world. Think of the United States only has 350 million people in it, whereas India or China each have a billion or more. They have 2 or 3 times as many people in their country, so there's a lot more people from each of those countries than there might be from the United States. But since we're only around people that we live by, we tend to assume that there's more of us out there than everybody else. But here's the basic idea. You're going to use the data and use the information we have, and you're going to use your proportions to help us change it from the real population into just something out of 100. So here's what that's going to look like. Let's take our first one here on gender. They tell us that there are 3,519,000,000 males in the world. We want to use a proportion to figure out how many males would there be if there was only 100 people in the world. So we're using a proportion. Think of how we did it in class. We wrote our little kind of cheat sheet. So this time we want to compare males to the total population. So we take the number of males on the top, 3,519,000,000. So there's going to be a lot of zeros over the total population, which was 7,038,000,000. And we want to know how much is it out of 100. 100 is our total. So total goes on the bottom, just like our total population. And now we do our cross products. Set each of those up, and then we would do our dividing. Okay? And you can do that work on the back of the page or in a separate sheet of paper. But we would do 3,519,000,000 times 100 is equal to 7,038,000,000 times x. Then we're going to divide each side by our 7 billion, and we would end up with 50 as our answer. If the world was made up of 100 people, 50 of them would be male. But we just set up at a proportion and solve it. It's going to be some big numbers, but it's basically the same idea. We're just kind of setting up that proportion. You'll notice here, they don't tell us the female population. But if you think about it, either you're male or you're female. So you could take the total population minus the male population, and that would give you your female population. And then you could set up your proportion, your female over your total, because we want it to be equal to something over 100, and you could solve it the same way. Let's take a look at another one. So down here, they break it down by age ranges. How many people are in the 0 to 14 range, which you guys are. The 15 to 64 age range, that would be my age or your teacher's age. And then the 65 plus. Think of them as those that would be retired. Notice there's not nearly as many that are retired at 65 plus as there are in kind of that middle age category. And that makes sense as you think of other countries that, they might not have the same life expectancy, or they might not have as many elderly people as part of their population. But same idea. We want to figure out the proportion of people who are 65 or over to the total population. So we set up a proportion. 563,040,000 over the total population, 7,038,000,000, is equal to something over or something out of 100. Okay, you're going to grab your calculator and do your cross multiplying. Just be careful with your zeros there. And then let me go back, and I would get 8 as my answer. So if there was 100 people in the world, only 8 of them would fall into the category of being 65 or older. So a very small portion of the population would be in that retirement age. But again, I just did my cross products. I multiplied my two diagonals to set up my equation. I don't have room for us to squeeze it in here, but you can do it on your separate sheet of paper. Divided both sides by 7,038,000,000 to get x by itself, and got my answer of 8. So let's see another one. Jump ahead in your packet and let's look at the section on geography. Here, instead of giving us the population, they give us the approximate fraction of the population. So for instance, 3/5 of the population in the world resides in Asia, or 22/200 resides in Europe. So to set up a proportion, we want to know how many are in Africa versus the total. And they tell us it's a ratio of 3:20. We want to know what would that be out of 100. So for some of you, you might see that you could solve this one without a whole lot of work. To get from 20 to 100, I would multiply times 5. So I could do the same thing up here and get 15 people. Sorry, I forgot my units there on my earlier answers. Or you can do your cross products. 3 times 100, and then x times 20. And then we divide both sides by 20. And we get our answer of 15 people. So we're just setting up a proportion using the information they have here. Here you'll notice that they didn't tell us Latin America, so you're going to have to do a little bit of math. Add up all the fractions you know, figure out what fraction am I missing to get back to one whole world. So let's try one more here. This one says the ratio of Chinese to the population is 3:25. So if I did Chinese over the total, I know it's 3/25, but I want to know what is it out of 100. So again, I can do my cross products. 3 times 100 is 300. X times 25 is 25x. Divide both sides by 25, and I would get 12 people. And again, you can use your calculator for the multiplication, but you have to show how you set up that proportion. But then notice the next problem. This one says the ratio of Chinese to Spanish. Well, we just figured out how many Chinese there were. We want to find out how many Spanish. So we have the Chinese to Spanish is 24:10. But this time we don't want to know it to the total, so we're not putting our 100 in there. We want the ratio of Chinese to Spanish. Well, we know that Chinese is 12. So that's going to come in here for Chinese, because anything about the Chinese population goes on top. We want to know the Spanish population, so that's going to go on the bottom. So this part is going to be a little bit different. You're using your answer from the previous one to help you with the next one in line. So we can do our cross products. 12 times 10 is 120. 24 times x is 24x. Divide both sides by 24 to get it by itself, and we get an answer of 5 people. But you're going to keep using that information to set up your proportions as you work your way through each of the problems. Same idea down here for poverty. Again, not everybody in the world is in poverty, so these two numbers are going to add up to be the total population, but you're going to do the same thing. We want to know how much it is out of 100, so you'll take the malnourished over your total, set up your proportion, and figure out how many people out of 100 would be classified as malnourished. Down here, how many live on less than $2 a day? Think about that. Only $2 a day for their entire living, their entire subsistence. Set up your proportion out of the total, figure out how much is it going to be out of 100. But read those directions, use my partial answer key that I have there to kind of help you out to see if you're on the right track, and then keep working through it.